Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It. Today I have Whitney Casey of Refinery coming to us from New York. Hello, Whitney.
Hello.
Welcome, and glad you could be here today. So let's start off with the first question. What is Refinery, and why did you start this business?
Refinery is a wardrobe operating system, and what that means is that we basically find everything you've ever purchased past 10 years, sometimes up to 15 years, and pull it into an online wardrobe for you. And then on that online wardrobe, we tell you when things need to be returned, which is a real problem for women. And then also when things you want are going on sale. So you can really optimize your clothing spend. I started it because we found that women were spending more on their clothing than they do on their education. And as someone who used the kind of technology like TripIt and Mint and all of these systems, these software that is developed to manage your trips or your banking or your music like Spotify and Netflix and your entertainment, it's like at one point, when is there going to be something that's going to manage the thing that you're spending the most money on? And that is your wardrobe. So I basically said to a friend of mine, I said, you know, do you find this to be a pain point? And then after that, it was off to the races.
That's cool. So how long have you been around?
We've only been, we launched a year ago, but it took a year and a half to build out the technology that finds your items.
Gotcha. It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely a cool idea. Years ago, before starting my business, Founder Suite, I was a consultant to startups, and I worked with a gal named Chris Elia who started Closet Couture. This is probably 10 years ago. I don't think it's still around, but it was a similar kind of inventory management for your wardrobe. It's a cool idea, so it's good to see this come to life. It's cool.
And the predecessors to this product were all really valiant in their efforts because, like, at the time, the technology didn't exist where they could create this, but there was a clear need for it. There are maybe 15 products out there that don't have the technology to automatically upload your items and find them sort of out there in the ether. And I think that was really the pain point in all those products. It's like you have to spend that time to go through your wardrobe and take a picture of everything and then enter 5 data points. It's like the whole point of this is to make it easier for women, and that's just a huge pain point. Although, I mean, in 2011, when they came out, they were crushing it. So, like, kudos to them.
Yeah, no, it's cool. So how much have you raised, and what's the how many rounds, and what's the constitution? It was an angel, venture, friends and family.
So our first product I bootstrapped. Then we did a small raise with a group of friends, like all women that we really looked to just sort of make introductions for us and who really got behind the product. And it was really important for us to make it by women, for women, funded by women. And those women were so instrumental in really helping us make some connections to really understand. And that's like one of the first tips I would say is like the first group of money that you go after just in the friends and family round needs to be so strategic. You should not take dumb money ever. And you really have to ask yourself, like, do I want this product so bad that I'm willing to take money from someone that is so ancillarily connected that doesn't have any excitement in this product, but they will give me money? And that answer should be no, because those people will somehow be the biggest Achilles heel, the thorn in the side, every single thing that you can think of that would happen wrong. The people don't believe in it from the beginning, and they're just giving you money because maybe they believe in you or they're a family friend or whatever. Do not take it.
Interesting. So how did you identify that first group of how many women was it? 5 or 6 or more?
It was 4 women.
Okay.
One of them is my co-founder, and she's also a celebrity. And I wanted her to be involved, but then she said, I want to invest also. So the best scenario is like co-founders who are both investing. And it really does feel good for other investors to know that you have some skin in the game that is not just your time.
Yeah.
And I know not everybody has the ability to do that, but you have to make some sacrifices in some way that kind of shows your initial investors like, oh, I'm willing to put some of my own comfort, not just sweat equity, but like a little bit of equity, even if it's a couple $1,000s, like, or 5,000 or 2,000. Maybe you don't go get the car that you want, or you don't have a down payment or anything. You're not paying off a certain loan at that time. It just shows that you've got skin in the game. That's not just sweat equity, because sweat equity is not really an assurance sometimes.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing actually how much you put in of your own money? Because I think this is interesting. A lot of founders wonder, are they, or it's interesting to know what it takes to get to a point where you can raise that first outside capital. So if you're willing to share that, you can pass.
I promised our board we would never disclose that, just because that's how we built the product. But it's tech, so you have to know it's expensive.
Okay.
And that's where I really don't ever want to do anybody a disservice to try to believe that you can fund yourself and bootstrap tech. You can bootstrap consumer goods products. It depends on how complex they are, but like when you're trying to bootstrap tech, it's really too complex and too expensive. Engineers are too expensive to bootstrap I'm 43. So I've had a career, I've had a best-selling book, so I saved that money and put it towards that. Gotcha. But if you are 20 and you just graduated and it's your life savings, I'm saying it should be in accordance to what you can earn and what your output is. But it is important to put some in. And and when it comes to tech, you need to be very careful. Unless you're the engineer yourself, that's a totally different story. But I'm not, and I had to pay engineers. So it was very expensive.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's go back to that first cabal of 4 investors. One was your co-founder. How did you find the other 3?
The others were found through my co-founder, because I wasn't a fashion person in any regard. I came from news, and she has such an affinity for fashion. And this isn't a fashion company, it's a tech company. But you try finding women in tech to invest. Not going to be easy, especially like out of your friends and family circle, not professional investors, but just professional investors per se, but not a VC or your professional or like institutional money. So basically, she identified them. We decided we were going to go to this. I was like, I hate events. I'm such an introvert. Are you sure we should do this? So we flew to Dallas, and we met all of these very fancy people at this like opening of this ridiculous store that all unbelievably ridiculous people would be at. And then we sat them down. We asked for a meeting with a group. We asked one woman to set up a meeting with a group of 5 women. And she was the one that invited us to the store opening. And she had been, she is an influencer who had a bunch of friends and was literally like, I'm grabbing everybody I know and making them listen to your presentation. And so we did. And one of those happened to be the Man Repeller. I don't know if you know her, but she's like a really big blogger and influencer and just like an amazing woman in style. And she sort of said, I'll be an early adopter, which took just an early adopter, like getting people to say they use your technology, then gets investors excited. So I would say that'd be the first piece of advice, is like try to get somebody in your space to not tweet about you, not put anything on Instagram, just say that they're using the product. They don't have to say it publicly, they just have to tell you. And you don't put that out publicly, but you tell investors. Like, I have this influencer who's using our product and she's amazing and she loves it and believes in it. And therefore people who follow her feel more comfortable. She's not out there proselytizing for you, but because they want equity and all that jazz. But then that got all these women really comfortable. She was in the meeting and she was sort of like, I love this. This is great. It very well could have been, she could have said, I hate this. This is useless. But that's the risk you take.
Cool. Did you say, it froze just for like a split second, did you say that was a tech conference or a fashion event?
No, we fashioned ourselves as a tech company, but we went, it's not easy to find women in tech. So we went to the fashion group and said, would you find this valuable?
Gotcha.
And we were worried because we were like, well, we don't want to position ourselves as a fashion company because we are not. So having investors in the fashion space wasn't optimal for us, actually. We wanted tech investors, but we didn't have access to them. And we knew that we would work with women, and that was really important. So just like go where you can and still make them valuable, though. Like this woman, one of our investors was a woman who was investing in tech, but in fashion tech. And that's very rare. And the other ones were just fashion people.
Gotcha. Great. So where was the company at when how much did you raise in that first round, if you can say that? And where was the company at? You had a working prototype or and some of these early kind of adopters?
We had V1, we had a prototype that we could share. It was in beta. And then once we raised that amount, we just call it sort of our angels, friends, and family. And it was kind of like a rolling amount, like we're going to get to this. And once we launch, we want to reach certain benchmarks. And then we thought, oh, we'll just raise like a Series A. And then what was really interesting is we met with investors and we said we wanted to raise 5 in a Series A. And like a couple of these VCs were like, you should call it a seed. And we were like, okay, fine, call it a seed. It's still 5 million we want to raise. Actually, we set out to raise 4 million, and even as an A. And they were like, oh no, New York A's run this. It just seemed so arbitrary. Like really, okay, whatever you want to call it. But it was actually great advice because there are different benchmarks that are metrics that these professional investors want to see based on an A, a B, and they do seem very arbitrary because it should be based on like what actual space you're in. So it's very odd, but it was great advice. I'm glad that this VC gave it to us because then we went and we ran with it, and it ended up being perfect because then they'd say, well, seed stage companies should have, oh, you guys have that. We had a lot more traction than a seed stage usually does. So we kind of threw them for a little bit of a loop there, but we were like, hey, we didn't expect we were going to get this much traction. It's not Series A traction of where we have like engagement and looking towards monetization. It's really just like, we have amazing potential. So go for the potential.
That's interesting. So what was the key kind of metrics you were putting in your pitch deck for that seed? Was it number of people signing up or some other, what were you kind of tracking and holding out as, hey, this is exciting, fund us?
It was really the numbers. So signups were very high. So I would say because I would never want to give an entrepreneur advice on you basically need to look at your one hero metric and say, how am I going to position this company around that metric? And it may not be signups. It may be your engagement. You have low signups, but you have ridiculous engagement. You have high engagement, high signups. You're a rock star. Just go for it.
Yeah.
But we all don't have that. And so, but you always have to answer all of the questions, and you need a real solid response. You need to test it out on a bunch of sort of lower tier people you aren't going to be aiming for. And really get rigorous in your deck responses and how you're going to answer all of that. And start with your own investors and then branch out from there. And then whatever your hero metric is, always push that investor back to that. And I always, one of the best pieces of advice I got from Jen Hyman, who is the founder of Rent the Runway and has raised a ton of money. She helped me practice my deck. And she basically was like, all right, let's look at all your weaknesses first. And I want you to basically jump ahead of that. And before you even start your pitch, you put those out there. And basically she was a genius for that, because I immediately was like, all right, we don't really know about our engagement. We just launched and this is a product that is a possibility to be a productivity tool, which means we don't know if our girl is going to be on it every day or every month or when she shops most or what. So, and also we operate in the background and we're updating people's things without them having to go to the site. So we sort of had 2 services. So I kind of had to get out ahead of that and say, hey, just so you know, If you're like looking for a seed stage company that has X, Y, and Z engagement, that's not us. So we are thinking more of a big picture. We have a ton of signups. We don't know where this product's going to go with that, but we are really hopeful for XYZ, but we're not that company. And I would just start out like that.
Interesting. I've never heard that advice, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but I can see how it can be effective. Kind of a risky strategy, but it can be effective, right? Yeah. Interesting.
She was like, bring out all of your dirty laundry first in the way that you want to present it, because they're going to get to it. That is their job. And if they don't get to it, you don't want them as investors. So
right. I've never heard of this before. It's really interesting. Let's touch on it a little more. Did it ever happen where you get the dirty laundry out there and the investors just focus on that and can't get past it? Like they're too stuck on that. Like I can see that possibly happening. Did that ever happen to you?
Only once. And I can't remember how many meetings we had, but it was more, it wasn't a right fit anyway.
Yeah.
I also we had terrible UX, terrible. Like that's part of the engagement story is because a lot of these tech companies now have, and this is important for founders to know, which was an odd thing, and they're all starting to add them, but they have design partners now. And like even Lightspeed just recently said, what's a design partner? And I kind of explained to them because they're like, we should have one of those. And I agree, it was really valuable. Like Google Ventures had somebody from Facebook that they poached that is like the queen of all of UX and design. She then gets into our product and starts to really, if your product is about engagement, then they should be interviewing you based on somebody who understands UX. User experience. Yeah. And if your product is about leggings and you are like outdoor voices, then they should be having someone who is like Mickey Drexler, who ran J. Crew, be a part of the interview process for you. And I think, but most tech companies need to know, these are becoming a really big factor in whether they're going to fund you. And so I got out ahead of our UX, knowing that we've never had a UX designer, that no one but this girl is the one that designed it, and I don't have my 10,000 hours. Yeah. And so I got an MVP out there, and it's got a lot of work, but it had a lot of signups. So let's figure it out, and we'll look for the UX team. And if I can do this in my terrible 10,000 hours, not an expert, then we can handle it with a professional. Yeah. But see how I got that out ahead? It's answering the engagement question that's going to happen later is telling them about how my inexperience of creating UX is a weakness, but is a fixable weakness. So it's that whole thing when you go on interviews, and they're like, all right, tell me all about yourself, blah, blah, blah. Now, what are your three, weaknesses or whatever? Instead, you start the interview with that, but you're basically setting them up to when they start picking upon you to not have that to pick about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then everything that follows after that is all the good stuff, right? So you've kind of, you're almost setting the threshold, and now it's all just exciting, cool things on top of that. So how much did you end up raising in your seed round, and who are the investors, and how many did you pitch, if you have a general idea, to get to the, I always like to kind of understand the funnel. What did your funnel look like? How many did you talk to? How many did you end up with?
So we set out to raise $4 million in an A. And like I said, then we ended up with the seed, and I put that in air quotes. And we ended up being oversubscribed and raised $5 million at the advice of our lead investor, which was NEA, Tony Florence. So here's what I took a very different approach. And I was I met with a lot of founders on how to do this. And I put them all together. So here's the advice on that. One is do a ton of research on who you want to approach, all the companies they've invested in, and make your list. Because just throwing spaghetti at investors is just it's basically you're gonna end up, your ratio to how many people think the baby's ugly and how many people think the baby's perfect is going to be way skewed by baby ugly. if you don't start picking your investors. And that's just like not a scenario you want to put yourself in, because it's miserable. You are like a masochist if you do that. So really hone in on who is invested in your space, who understands your space, because the first thing they're going to say is, I don't really know this space, so don't meet with me. But they will, because they have FOMO. So you'll just end up having a lot of really bad meetings if you don't start. So really, really suss that out and cull that list down. And then once you do that, then wait and set up all of your meetings within 2 weeks of each other. Like legitimately, it's like a barrage because if you don't realize that this person who's the associate here went to school with it, they all went to HBS, they all went to Stanford, they're all very bright, amazing people, and they happen to all know each other. Yeah. And they're all talking, back channeling, like, oh, have you heard about this deal? And all of a sudden your deal is blowing up. Not because it is, but because you have 4 meetings a day and you are scheduling them like X, Y, and Z. Like, so we did 3 days in San Francisco, 3 days in Los Angeles, 3 days in New York. And just, even though we are based in New York, we essentially would say, we're going to be in New York these 3 days. Like, and we just like hammered it out. And it was painful because it was basically like a 2-week process, because we would have 1 day in between where we would travel. But when you say you're setting them all up in those times, like they don't want to miss out. And also it's just a barrage. Like the barrage theme works. The women who raise a lot of money at Away and Lola were the 2 sort of founders that said to us, you guys got to do it this way. And then when we did, it was so good, because then all of a sudden, then after that, a week after, people started calling us saying, we hear you're raising, we'd love to hear the deal.
Interesting.
And then we had extra follow-up meetings, and we would add people to the schedule, sort of like, but we put a date where we weren't gonna keep meeting, and we were gonna try. We then said, okay, we'll stop meeting on this day, and let's circle back with all these people, like constantly keep them in the mix. Always. One of the investors said to me, you did such a good job of keeping me without spamming me. Like, that's key too. Don't spam them.
What were you sending a monthly update, a weekly update? How were you keeping them in the loop without spamming, or what was the approach?
Like spammy is like, oh, I have another meeting. Hey, what's going on with like trying to get them to the table. I would just say, like, if there was really something relevant, like a big benchmark, like we were going to be on the Today Show, and I'd be like, hey, check it out, blah, blah. That's not spammy. That's like something cool that they would want to know about. But spammy is like when you start to try to get them to the table and you're trying to say like, oh, we have this meeting here. What are you doing? And it's really hard to get that first one. It is like, I just like solving, it's like for a first time founder and raising, it's like getting that first one. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you necessarily and to get them to the table, but I definitely know that they do not respond to, even though they have FOMO, they do not respond to, I'm meeting here, I'm going to need an answer. I mean, I had one founder tell me, you just need, and I don't know, I mean, I don't say this is a good idea, but she says, you need to just tell them that you have a term sheet. And I was like, but if I don't, then what happens? And she was like, well, they can't ask you who the term sheet is from. And I'm like, actually, no, they do. They ask you all the time, who is a term sheet? And you sound so dodgy if you're like, I can't tell you. Because frankly, you're not supposed to be out shopping term sheets, but at a seed stage, a first investment, your lead investor is not going to be like, oh, you can't tell anybody who this is, it just seems ridiculous. So don't try that. Just don't.
So to get that first one to come in, was that NEA then? Did you fill out the rest of the round by kind of, how did you I think you know what I'm trying to ask there. How did you fill out the rest of it? How did I get them? Yeah.
How did I get them to basically say, fine, we'll be the ones?
Yeah.
Well, the good thing was we had a lot of interest. So I also think I sent this, I mean, I don't know if it ever, I'll have to ask him. I'm going to see him this week. I'll ask him if that email was like what it was. But I sent him an email basically had some concerns that he was focused on. And I had to get him back to where I remember where he was the most thrilled about the product. So you have to be a good listener in your first meeting, because your first meeting, everybody's going to be very excited. So remember what they were most excited about. And if you can fulfill and you can fulfill that thing, you don't ever want to get them, if they're excited about something that you know you can't like really follow through on, that's stupid. But if it's something you know you can deliver on, then you go back and you focus on that. And you say, do you remember, you think this is a huge play. You think this is, and you tell them what they were excited about. But you have to listen to them. You can't be telling them what you're excited about. You have to really listen in that first meeting. What were their concerns? What did you see? Let's look at their body language, know what they were excited about. They're poker players too. But sometimes when they get really excited, they'll show you, and you have to be paying attention and not so nervous and worried about your stuff and selling to also listen. Good. So basically, I knew he was excited about a big platform play. I knew he was not excited about being able to sell data or being able to sell women other clothes. He wanted the whole thing. He's the biggest tech investor in this space. He's going to go for a platform play. So I sent him an email that reminded him hey, this may be technology that exists before, but so did Uber. They had technology that existed before. X, Y, and Z, don't forget the big picture. Remember, this is a huge play. When we make it, we will be changing retail. And so just really go with whatever, he kept saying, this has to be a big platform. It has to be all encompassing. It has to be the entire life cycle of clothing. And I just kept remember him saying that. So rather than focus on the unbelievable data that we can get and generate this great experience for our user and our girl and engagement and me really caring about the fact that women spend too much on clothes. No. He wants it to be big, and I believe we can be big. So I feel like I can deliver on the promise that he wants. So saying that to him and sending him that email, I think you have to reinforce the things he wanted or she wanted. Yeah. I can really say he, because it is very rare to find a female investor that can invest in a $5 million seed. Yeah. So unfortunately.
Let's touch on that just for very, very brief, because there's so much stuff in the news about female founders and the dearth of money raised by female founders. Did you ever feel you were at a disadvantage, or do you ever have any issues in being a female founder raising a healthy amount? I mean, that's a serious round you raised.
100%. And I'll tell you, not in who we picked. So we really, like I said, sussed out the list of the people that we wanted to be in the round who had invested in women before. So we knew that had to be a requirement. But then the other thing is we're not a consumer goods. So it's not tangible, and it's very hard the first part of our pitch was spent so much on, I would say every meeting we had with every founder who helped us with our deck, we spent the majority of the time talking about the first 3 slides, which were going to explain to a man why this was a pain point for a woman. And where we spent so much time feeling this is so unfair. Why do we have to do this? Half of the population are women and feel this pain point. But okay, get over yourself. You're going to have to do it. And it's just like if you were selling to some sector that didn't understand your product, the same thing. Learn how to speak and learn how to get them to understand this pain point, and they will. But if you don't, and you don't communicate to them, so we used, this is crazy, but we used Seamless. So Seamless and Open Table and Yelp as a way to be okay, when you're deciding what you want to eat as a guy, you will go through your phone and maybe just even look at that as an inventory. Okay, these are inventories of places I could eat, just to sort of spur on thought of where you want to go to dinner. And then you'll make a reservation or whatever. Well, at the very same time, we had 2 images, one of a man looking at his phone, and then you could see what's on his phone, how he's scrolling through Seamless. We had a woman on a subway scrolling through exactly her clothing. So when this guy is thinking about what he's going to eat, she's thinking about what am I going to wear to go eat. And so we married them that way, and like tried to explain to men that like, oh, you may think about what you want to eat tonight, mid-afternoon. A woman will start thinking about what she wants to wear to a dinner like 2 days, 3 days ahead of time, what she wants to pack, maybe a week, maybe even a month. So like to really wrap their minds around the fact that this is something that is a real pain point for women, and the fact that we have to stand in front of our wardrobe to decide what we're going to wear. So really playing on the accessibility.
Very interesting. Okay, last question, and I'm going to give you two options for it. Either what one piece of advice would you give yourself if you were doing it all over again, or what piece of advice would you give to perhaps women founders who are starting this process of raising capital? Pick either approach you want.
Well, I think there's just one other piece of advice that I would be remiss if I didn't share, that an investor shared with me that was the most important thing for a man or a woman, is the last 5 minutes of your meeting. So they all last about, depending on how entertaining you are, they can last 30 to 45, sometimes an hour. But you start to know when it's wrapping up. And what you need to do is you need to finish strong with, and you need to get answers. Like, so basically, you need to stop talking, you finish, and then you start getting answers. You start asking. It's the most important time. You need to figure out where their mind is. Like the advice I told you earlier about really understanding what they liked, you'll hear that throughout the conversation because they'll focus on it. But at the end, you need to drill home. It's like, what do you think? You know, like get their opinion, because that is going to be how you're going to follow up with them. Yeah. And if you don't wrap your mind around what they're thinking and what they're worried about at the end, and you don't get it from them, then you are going to be setting yourself up for like a terrible conclusion, because you may go off thinking that they loved it and they don't, and then you are wasting your time with them. You need to move on. And so that last 5 minutes, if you can really get them answering some really important questions, like where are you? What is your process like? Yep. What are the next steps? You will get from those 3 questions a real strong, like you will know where you stand with that investor.
That's awesome. That's great. I think that's really good, tactical, actionable advice that we can take home with. So this has been fantastic. So for anyone who wants to check out your site, it's just finery.com, correct?
Yep, and we have an app also. It's love. It's getting more love, but we just sort of soft launched, so if people want to try it out, we're happy to get all the feedback.
Wonderful, awesome. Well, thank you so much. This is really good. Lots of good nuggets in there, and I appreciate it. So I wish you continued success, and onward and upward for Finery. Thanks, Whitney.
Yes, and also I'm happy to answer any questions from any founders at any time.
Great.
So you can always email me.
How should they reach you? By email or?
Whitney@finery.com.
Wonderful. That's great. I love the paying it forward, paying it back.
Heck yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Thank you, Whitney. I appreciate it. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye.